Like the theme for our event this evening, united is a word that is often used to describe the cohesiveness of macro examples. I imagine my own definition visualizing a group of people standing up and fighting for what they believe in. And it's a word that's somehow patriotic in my mind. And I think this is because when I was little, I memorized the national anthem and would not stop belting it to my preschool classmates. But when I take time to think about what that word truly means to me, it becomes serious, a little bit more personal even. Perhaps that's because there was a time when I could not feel united and empowered within myself. I didn't have the capacity to believe what I went through, resulting in my mind and body lacking that cohesiveness it needed in order to endure. There are several statistics on sexual assault that stick out like a sore thumb. And I'm going to pause for a moment so that you may read the slide at your own pace. These are emotionally heavy data points to hear. They are also ones that are relevant to my experiences. I was sexually assaulted while on a date with someone who earned my trust. Then again, a relative, a family member I had known all my life, put his hands on me. Both occurred within 3 miles of where I was living. And while I only reported the first one, both are walking this earth free, without shame, without consequences. Last summer, I was diagnosed with PTSD at a local crisis center, something that continues to affect me to this day. And it's interesting to think about how the word united ties into all of this. After trauma, the mind and body are far from unanimous. One thing I learned in therapy for sexual assault is that traumatic events are not better or worse than another. They are simply different. So while that experience in college was horrible, the one with my family member felt personal. And for a while there, when my head would hit the pillow at night, I would expect the worst, and the worst would always come. Although I could recognize that I was safe in my own home, in my own bed even, my mind and body disagreed. As a result, reoccurring nightmares would trickle in over and over until my alarm would blissfully go off. And for a while there, after the first assault, I repressed everything so much that it wasn't really even a thought in my mind. I had convinced myself that perhaps I didn't try hard enough to say no, stop, I don't want this. And for the record, know that I tried. Perhaps my simple allowance to go on a date for the first time in my college life was a mistake that was my fault. And when I got back to my dorm that night and cried to my friends, I couldn't shake that feeling that perhaps it was something I simply regretted, as if it was a choice I was able to consensually make. There was no explanation for why my first kiss was so cruel. Sexual assault simply wasn't in my vocabulary. So when my cousin put his hands on me, my body froze just like it had a few years prior. My mind was flooded with past memories, and my body struggled to keep up. And I was filled with rage. How could this be happening to me again? I didn't have an answer for that. My body felt familiarly numb. I couldn't even move. Now, I don't consider myself a very religious person, but I can tell you that I prayed for some higher power to save me that night. And when it was all over, I hugged him and my other family members goodbye as if nothing happened. It's a miracle I made it home safe. Muscle memory drove me to my house because I couldn't. And when I got to my room, all I could do was cry. How did this happen to me again? As high school or even college students, we learn the concepts of fight or flight pretty early on in psychology class. We know that adrenaline and noradrenaline pair up in our body to create this response. And while these hormones are created internally, the symptoms manifest physically. Our heart rate picks up, muscles become tense, mouth gets dry. These are all visible signs that something is wrong. But what happens when the body doesn't feel like these are safe options? Along with fight and flight, there is also freeze. This immobility sets in automatically and uncontrollably. It's simply another way for the body to shut down in order to keep itself safe. So when society asks survivors why they didn't say no or why they didn't fight back, the freeze response is why. The mind is incredibly complex and does what it can to save itself in the midst of danger, as well as in those unending moments afterwards. And like healthy bereavement, I experienced endless cycles of grief as they ebbed and flowed between the 5 main stages. Above is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model, and know that for most people, healing from grief and trauma is rarely linear. The questions of how could this be happening to me again, and how did this happen to me again, were my versions of denial. I couldn't comprehend that these events had occurred, nor could I understand what I was going to have to do in order to cope. And that made me angry. How dare these individuals feel entitled to my body? How dare they violate me in a way that changed how I view intimacy and trust? And with that anger, I began to bargain. One example that truly showcases this was that first assault back in college. Towards the middle of the date, I felt a wave of danger, and I didn't know what to do with that intuition. I want to say that all the red flags were there, and because of that, I put the blame on myself for so long. There was a particular part in the date when he made it very clear that he had every intention to have sex with me, whether I wanted to or not. But I bargained with that because, hey, it would have gotten to that point if I didn't rescue myself when I did. Next comes depression. For me, this looked like hiding in bed until the pain would hopefully fade away. I couldn't eat. God knows I couldn't sleep. I felt disgusted and so alone. The triggers come in waves, and sometimes all I can do is take a deep breath, close my eyes, and remind myself that I am not back there. I am safe now. I am safe. As you can see above, the last stage is acceptance. Now, this is a tricky one. I don't accept my assaults in a way that excuses or even begins to forgive their behavior. In the present moment, I am not there yet, and I might never be. But I am able to accept certain pieces of my story. After being connected with a girl who was assaulted by the same person in college, we've reported our assaults, have attended support groups, and have truly grown close. After confiding in my family all that my cousin did, I've become more confident in my boundaries and the idea that family members are not relatives, they are chosen. Most importantly, I've been able to accept that my assaults have gotten me to where I am today. They have fueled my passion to get my master's in social work, and they've allowed me to learn the types of love and intimacy that I deserve and feel safe with. Over time, I've been able to find my confidence again. Through leaning into my emotions and facing them head on, I am finally able to look at myself with pride, kindness, and empathy. This body did all she could to protect herself in the midst of attacks that she did nothing to ask for. This body hugs my loved ones and takes me to the most amazing places. From those assaults until now, I've attended therapy and support groups as I move through challenges and learn how to overcome them. I've worked with nonprofits that help directly with other survivors. Through this work, I am able to give back to a community that has helped me as well. For school, I've created numerous projects that shed light on this issue and allow my social work peers to become more trauma-informed when it comes to gender-based violence. I've met my empathetic partner who does what he can to hold space for my experiences. He loves me for who I am and honors everything I am bound to become. And most importantly, I've been able to find that peace and love in myself for myself. When I was working on this speech, it became clear how monumental it would have been for me to hear something like this a few years prior. Trauma is often isolating. We feel like there is nobody else on this planet who could possibly relate to what we've been through. Society and our inner monologue do their best to convince us to stay silent, when in fact, reaching out for help and sharing our story can be one of the bravest things we ever choose to do. It takes courage to seek support, and each and every person is worthy of that. Roughly 1 in 3 women and 1 in 16 men will experience sexual trauma in their lifetime. Statistically, there are many in the audience tonight who may have related to some of the topics that I discussed. And I wish that I could say that time heals all wounds, but it takes work and requires us to build a community of trusted loved ones so that we may feel supported throughout our healing journey. Crisis hotlines and therapy appointments can create stability for both our physical and mental well-being. And by reaching out to friends, family, and other survivors and hearing them say those 3 words, I believe you, well, that can single-handedly change the way we view ourselves forever. You are not alone and never were. I want to leave you all with a quote from Tarana Burke, the founder of the Me Too movement. She says, "Shame is insidious. It's all-consuming. It gets into the nooks and crannies, cracks and crevices of your life. There are not enough messages that say, this is not your shame to carry. This is not your burden to bear. And if your body can hold the type of trauma that sexual violence does, then it can hold joy and it can hold love." Thank you all for being a part of my healing journey tonight and holding love with me. Thank you.